Graders, and welcome to your math lesson for today. For today, you will need a little bit more than what you needed on Tuesday. You will need your 5B textbook, your 5B workbook, your math resource binder, paper, and pencil. If you did not add those new materials that you picked up from materials pickup to your math resource binder, you're going to need that packet as well, because the thing we're going to be working on is this. Rules for multiplying and dividing. Well, I'll do a little bit of working on it, not a lot, but to get us started. So go ahead and get those things and then come on back. So like a broken record, I've been telling you, and it continues to be true, that these warm-up problems that we are doing are going to be good practice for our upcoming, and by upcoming, I mean at the end of the quarter, quarterly exam. So it's just going to be good for us to continue to be reviewing and going over and practicing these as we go throughout the quarter. With that in mind, fifth graders, I'm also going to probably start adding some of these review problems to your homework. Maybe it'll be on the sheet itself. Maybe it'll be a quick form. So you might find that there's going to be two parts to homework assignments coming up forward, the things that you need to turn in, one of which will be maybe a couple of questions that are going to be these kinds of review questions, and then the work that we're working on currently. So don't be surprised. And maybe I'll just combine them into the same sheet. We'll have to see as we go forward what this looks like. But you'll see here that we're supposed to estimate and then find the value. So remember, when you're estimating, fifth graders, you want to make it as simple as possible on yourself. No need to overcomplicate things. And then, since these are adding and subtracting of decimals, remember the rule that those decimal points need to line up anytime you are adding or subtracting decimals. So go ahead, pause, give these a try. When you're done, come on back and see how you did. So fifth graders, if we are in the business of keeping it as simple as possible, which we all should be when we are doing our estimates, I would have rounded each of these numbers to 100, okay? 100 plus 100 is 200. So a strong estimate in this case would have been 200, okay? Now we want to do our vertical addition, the vertical algorithm, making sure that we have lined up our decimal point, right? So they're stacked there, okay? So 9 plus 9 is 18, carry the 1. 9 plus 9 is 18, plus 1 is 19, carry the 1. There should be a pattern developing. 9 plus 9 is 18, plus 1 is 19. Making sure to line up that decimal point. And again, 9 plus 9 is 18, plus 1 is 19. So our exact answer should have been 199 and 98 hundredths, okay? And again, that's pretty close to our estimate. Same thing here, keep it simple. You could have rounded this to 70, 72. Either of those would have been fine. So I'm going to say 72 minus 1 to get 71. Maybe you said 70 minus 1 and got 69. That would have been great as well, okay? I would have said either of those, 71 or 69 would have been great estimates here. So now, as we're finding that exact answer, remember, we have to line up our decimal points. So if we're doing this carefully, we're going to find that there's more digits up here. So what do? We add our 0 in order to make sure that we are keeping these aligned, and our answer should have that decimal point as well. From here, we just do our subtraction, right? So 8 minus 0 is 8. 1 minus 9 we can't do, so we're going to regroup here. I'm slip sliding. 11 minus 9 is 2. Again, we have to regroup. So this becomes a 12 and this a 1. 12 minus 9 is 3. 1 minus 0 is 1. 7 minus 0 is 7. So we end up with 71 and 328 thousandths, which again, pretty close to our estimate here. So as always, I mean, again, speaking of broken record, I've been saying this to you all a lot, but if you're doing these warm-up problems and you're finding you're having a tough time with them, then that's a good clue to come and see during office hours for a little bit of help to work on some of these problems. And again, it'll help you as we're moving through quarter 3. By the time you get to that quarterly exam, if you've been working along with me on these warm-up problems, this shouldn't be super foreign. You should feel like, yeah, I've done a bunch of these already and I know what I'm doing, okay? All right, with that, let's get into our lesson for today. So our objective, so we've multiplied by 10, 100,000. We've divided by 10, 100,000. Today, we're going to be multiplying by tenths, hundredths, thousandths, okay? We're going to process this logically and sort of see how this pattern is going to work, but I am going to tell you there might be a part of you that will say, what? It'll be fine though. We'll get through it, okay? So first things first, I want to do is just review this rules of multiplying and dividing. We've done this for the last few lessons, so it shouldn't be super foreign, but I want to put it all in one place so that you can refer back to it. So find that. It should be in your math resource binder. It was the first page. Well, after my note to you, it was in that first specifically math page that came with that packet that you picked up at quarter 3 pickup. So make sure you have it, and then we'll get right into it. So I'm going to flip you around so that we can get into our work. So these are rules that are not new. We've definitely done them before, but we're going to keep practicing them. So when we multiply by 10, remember those zeros. When we multiply by 10, we want to move the decimal point 1 to the right. You should be filling these in with me as we go. When you multiply by 100, you're going to move that decimal point 2 to the right. When you multiply by 1,000, we're moving that decimal point 3 to the right. And again, we've kind of hinted at if we just kept adding zeros, we'd just keep going, right? So if it was 10,000 and there were 4 zeros, we'd go 4 to the right. We just keep on going, okay? And remember, with division, we're going to do the opposite. So we're going to go dividing by 10, 1 to the left. When dividing by 100, 2 to the left. When dividing by 1,000, we go 3 to the left. And again, 10,000 would be 4, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so these are rules that we've been putting into place over the last couple days, and it's going to continue to be true. So now things get a little bit exciting as we work it out a little bit differently. So we're going to be looking in our textbooks today, starting on page 35, okay, to work through this, okay? And this is going to kind of explain why the rule that is the rule is going to be true. So we're going to start on this left-hand side. And I'm going to write it here, but you can follow along with me. So our first example we have is 30 times 1/10 as the decimal. And so really what they're doing to start is just explaining to you why the rule that we're going to follow is the case. And so they're showing us this by remembering that this is a decimal and fraction, right? These are interchangeable, decimals and fractions. So really we'd be doing 30 times 1/10, right? 1/10 is the same thing as 1/10. And remember, when we're multiplying fractions, we want to do numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator, okay? And so in order to do that, we want to put our whole numbers over 1. This is a little bit of review, but hopefully it's coming back to you. It wasn't too long ago. And so now we just multiply across. 30 times 1 is 30. 1 times 10 is 10. We always want to check, can we simplify? Can we make proper? The answer is yeah. 30 over 10 is the same as 30 divided by 10. So when we simplify it, it's 3. So we see that 30 times 1/10 is 3. And just like we reviewed, we've kind of been considering like directions of decimal points, moving. So maybe you're starting to make an observation as we're looking from here to here, what might have happened with a decimal point. So we'll see. But let's look at the next example. So now they say 3 times 1/10, which remember, just like up here, 3 times 1/10, this can be considered as a fraction, okay? So again, we can do our multiplication of fractions. 3 times 1 is 3. 1 times 10 is tenths. 3/10, or as a decimal, 3/10. So again, we're kind of looking at where the decimal point is moving. You might be starting to make an observation or notice a pattern, but let's go one more time. Okay, 3/10 minus 1/10. So again, we can think of this like we've thought of fractions. This is 3/10, this is 1/10. 3/10 times 1/10. Now we just multiply across. 3 times 1 is 3. 10 times 10 is 100. We get 3/100ths, or as a decimal, 3/100ths. And so now we pause and think, is there a rule occurring here? So up here, we would have, we didn't have the decimal point, but I wrote it in to help. So we went from here to here. So it looks like our decimal point moved one place to the left. Here's our second example. It started here and ended here. So again, it looks like one place to the left. Here, we started with our decimal point here and ended with it here, so we went one place to the left. And so we're starting to see that this seems to be a rule that we can apply. So this is the rule that we see in at the bottom of page 35, which is that when a decimal is multiplied by 1/10, we move the decimal point one place to the left. And so you might think, what? If I'm multiplying, I'm getting a smaller number? So far, you've probably considered that with multiplication, the number should get bigger. And that is true when your number is greater than 1 or equal to, I guess if it's equal to 1, it stays the same. But when you multiply by a number that's greater than 1, your product will be greater. Okay, the answer is going to be greater, but this is less than 1. And so when you multiply by a number that's less than 1, your product is actually going to get smaller, okay? And if you think about it, fractions are division and decimals are fractions, which means that if we're multiplying by something less than 1, a decimal that's less than 1, it's going to end up being a lot like division, okay? It's going to get smaller. So knowing that this is true, and maybe you want to write this down. Maybe that's something that is interesting to you, is to write this down. We're going to continue to apply that as we look on. And so in this case, as you look back at your textbook, we're seeing what's happening as we're multiplying by 1. So here we were multiplying by 1/10, and now we're multiplying by 1/100th. Okay? And so what's happening? We're going from 30 to 12.3, or 3/12 to 3/100ths, or 3/10 to 1/2 3/1000ths. And so we see a second part of this rule, which is that on page 36, when a decimal is multiplied by 1/100th, we move the decimal point 2 places to the left. And it actually continues to be a little bit of a building off of our zeros. Because if we look at this rule, there's 1 0 in this decimal, and we're going 1 place to the left. In this case, there's 2 zeros, and we go 2 places to the left. And I bet you could infer, or deduce is probably a better word here, an answer. If we're multiplying by 1,000th, we have 1, 2, 3 zeros, so we're going 3 places to the left, okay? So as we're looking at practice, this is really should be pretty speedy. Again, we're not doing a vertical multiplication here. We're not writing this problem vertically and then solving it. But what we should be doing is just moving that decimal point as many places as it tells us. So let's do some practice. We should be on page 36 in our textbooks right now. That's way so super blurry. There we go. And again, this is going to be a matter of moving the decimal point. So 3A, 6/10 times 1/10. Remember, this is less than 1, so we need to be moving that decimal point to the left. Okay, how many places? I see 1 0, so 1 place to the left. Okay, so now look where it ended up. It's going to be 0.06. But remember, we always want to have a 0 in front of that decimal point if there's no other whole number. That is our proper way of expressing our decimal. Okay, how about here? Times 1/10. Again, we're going 1 to the left. So we should see a decimal point followed by 0, 0, 6. And then we have to add that 0 there. 5 times 1/10. So there is no decimal point here, but we need to remember with whole numbers that the decimal point is at the end of the whole number. So we add that decimal point, we go 1 to the left. So now we have a decimal point followed by a 5, and we add that 0, 5/10. So fifth graders, go ahead and pause, try D, E, and F. Come on back and see how you did. So for D, again, we have to imagine that that decimal point is at the end of the whole number. We move it 1 to the left and we end up with 2 3/10. E, the decimal point is there for us, so 3 4/10 times 1/10. We move it 1 to the left. So now we should have a decimal point followed by 3, 4, and we add that 0, 34/100. And F, sliding off the screen a little bit, 14/100 times 1/10. Again, 1 to the left, so now we have decimal point 0, 1, 4. And we add that 0 at the beginning. Okay, so we're going to build off of that, fifth graders, by looking at if we multiply by 100th, which remember, if we're multiplying by 100th now, we're going to we see these 2 zeros, which means our decimal point should go 2 places to the left. Okay, so we'll do a few together and a few on our own. So 4 times 100th. So again, there is no decimal point, so we have to imagine that the decimal point is at the end, and we go 1, 2 places over. And remember, anytime we see a bubble here that doesn't have a 0, that means we've got to add a 0. So now we know we have a decimal point, 0, 4, and we want to add that 0 to the beginning. H, now we do have a decimal point, and we're multiplying by 100th. So 1, 2 zeros, we go 1, 2 to the left. So our decimal point is going to end up here. So we see a decimal point. There's a blank bubble, which we know means a 0. And then our 0, 4. So we end up with 4 thousandths. I, 8 times 100th. Again, there's no decimal point. We imagine it's here. We go 1, 2 to the left. So it's going to end here. So now we have that blank bubble there is a 0, 8. And we add our 0 to the beginning. So fifth graders, go ahead and pause. I want you to pause and try J, K, and L, and then come on back and see how you did. So 42 times 100th, again, that decimal point would be there. We have to add it, and we say 1, 2. It ends here. So our answer is 42 hundredths. 83 4/10 times 100th. So we have our decimal point here. So we say 1, 2. It's going to end in front of the 8. So now we have 8, 3, 4. And of course, we want to add that 0 at the front. And L, 6 2/10 times 100th. Again, we go 1, 2 to the left. That's where our decimal point will be. That empty bubble means we need to add a 0. So we end up with 62 thousandths. Okay, so fifth graders, at this point, we're going to stop here. There's a practice sheet that is attached. So the practice, again, you want to try and complete. See how you use the key to see how you did. Okay, and again, I should have said checkpoint 1 just happened, right? Based on how that lesson went, you can say, I'm ready to try the practice work, or maybe I should go visit office hours. Practice work, once you check with your key, see if you can correct your mistakes. If you can, great. If not, another checkpoint. Come and see one of us during office hours. When you're ready, we're going to go on to page 24, which I'd actually like you guys to look at. So you can see, you know how they do this in the workbooks, right? Where they kind of help you set up a little bit, okay? So in this case, they're trying to walk you through what I walked you through from our textbook page 35 to show you why the rule is true. But we've already done that. So I want you not to be confused by this part of things. If you want to cross them out, you can just ignore it. What you need to do here is find the answer by, if we're multiplying by 1/10, moving that decimal point 1 to the left. So your answer really should just be, if you were to do this one, 7/100. Again, you can ignore this. And then as you're moving on, we're just moving that decimal point. Okay, so note that as you're going through your homework for today. All right, fifth graders, that is our lesson for today. I'm going to leave a little teaser out there, though. We've multiplied by tens, hundreds, thousands. We've divided by tens, hundreds, thousands. Today, we multiplied by tenths, hundredths, thousandths. We didn't actually, but you could imagine 1, 2, 3, and I hinted at, right? 3 to the left. So you could maybe, if you were kind of a predicting sort of person, maybe you're predicting that you are going to divide by tenths, hundredths, thousandths. And again, it's going to be a little bit tricky, but it's coming. So maybe you can start thinking about what we've learned, particularly with some of those rules that we went over today. Okay? Good luck, fifth graders, and remember to come see us during office hours for help.